Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today the chamber continues to hear testimony of witness Su Thi. Mr. M. Hoi, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals to today's proceedings. Greffier. Mr. President, for today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Nuji is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his right to be present in the courtroom. The waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The witness who is to continue his testimony today, that is Mr. Su Thi, as well as Mr. Muang Sawan, his duty counsel, are present in the courtroom. There is no reserved witness today. Thank you. President, thank you, Mr. M. Hoi. The Chamber now decides on the request by Nguyen Chia. The Chamber has received a waiver from Nguyen Chia, dated 3rd June 2016, which states that due to his health, that is headache, back pain, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requests to waive his rights to be present at the 3rd June 2016 hearing. Having seen the medical report of Nguyen Chia by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC, dated 3rd June 2016, which notes that Nguyen Chia has a chronic back pain, and it becomes severe when he sits for long, and recommends that the chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Nguyen Chia his request to follow today's proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means. The chamber instructs the AV unit personnel to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Nguyen Chia can follow. That applies for the whole day. Again, the floor is given to the Deputy Co-Prosecutor to continue putting further questions to the witness. You may proceed.
Merci, bonjour, monsieur.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good morning, parties. Good morning, witness. We are supposed to go up to 10 a.m. this morning, and then I'll give the floor to the civil parties up to the break at 11. Mr. President, I would like to show the witness 3 documents. They are documents E3/2242. It was already shown the witness yesterday, and I would like to add some other questions. We have document E3/2203, or rather, says co-prosecutor 2209, and then E3/1955. These are lists of entering entering detainees.
Yes, you may proceed.
Mr. President, the co-prosecutor is going too fast. Witness, can you look at the first document, E3/2242?
Just asked to slow down.
Donc E3 bar.
So it's E3/2242. The page in English is 0091 9925 to 26. In Khmer, 00 I'm sorry, I gave the ERN in French. So in French, 00919925 to 26. In Khmer, 00021 I realize I don't have an ERN in English. This is a list of prisoners who arrived on the 11th of July 1978. They were brought in by Bang. That name is mentioned at the bottom. And they're from Ministry S71 in the State Garment Manufacturing Department, K9. As stated at the bottom of the document, we have the name T. That is the person who received the prisoners. I had a question regarding the Ministry S71 as indicated on the document. What was the purpose of that ministry referred to as S71, and do you know who headed that ministry?
In relation to the communication with S71 office, I was not aware of that. And I did not know who was in charge of that office.
Est-ce qu'en relation avec S20,
In relation to S21, did you ever hear the name Pang? P-H-A-N-G.
No, I did not know Pong at S71.
il y a de nombreux combattants
There are several combatants on that list, which was from Office K7. Do you know what that Office K7 was?
I did not know about Office K7, and I'd like to make it clear that the people in receipt of a communication between K7 or S71 were those guards who were posted outside.
Passons au deuxième document.
Let us go to the second document, E3/2209. In Khmer, the RN is 00087036241. In English, 00893763 up to 68. And I also have the ERN in French. It is 00878332 up to 37. These are 6 pages of lists of persons who entered S21 on the 28th of April 1978. This list has already been authenticated by you at the 2009 28 July hearing, and it is on the first page of this document. We have the name of a person, Pon, Otron Tinieng, beg your pardon. This is a Vietnamese farmer, Truonthinieng, Truon Thi Nieng, aged 14. She was a girl, and her occupation was Vietnamese farmer. We're going to look at 3 other Vietnamese mentioned on the list, and it is on the very last page of the document. And their names are handwritten. In the transcript of the hearing, E3/7603, which is a document on which you yourself wrote the names in your own hand. So here we are talking of 3 Vietnamese described as Vietnamese farmers, aged between 35 and 50, and they came from the southwest zone. First of all, let me ask a question regarding the 14-year-old girl. You stated yesterday that ordinarily you did not register children aged under 15. Is this an exception to the rule? And do you therefore admit that you did register that person?
In relation to the Vietnamese girl who was 14 years old, I actually wrote down her name. She did not come along with her parents. She was by herself, and for that reason I had to write her name down along with her brief biography.
J'ai une question de clarification.
I have a question for purposes of clarification regarding the 3 other Vietnamese on the last page. It is said that they were Vietnamese rice farmers and that they came from the southwest zone. Can you tell the chamber whether the term Vietnamese rice farmer applied to Vietnamese who were coming from Vietnam but who were arrested by the Khmer Rouge forces in the southwest zone, or were they Vietnamese rice farmers who had remained in democratic Kampuchea during the period of that regime and were arrested in the southwest zone?
Could you please repeat your question? I don't fully get it.
Oui, je voudrais savoir.
Yes, my question is whether the 3 persons described as Vietnamese rice farmers who hailed from the southwest zone were rice farmers who were living in Vietnam but who were arrested by the forces of the southwest zone that is close to the border or in Vietnam, or were they Vietnamese rice farmers resident in Cambodia in the southwest zone and who were arrested in that zone? Can you clarify the matter? And if you do not know, please say so.
In relation to the 3 Vietnamese from the southwest zone, I do not have a clear memory as to where they were arrested or in any particular area in the southwest zone.
Juste une ou deux questions.
I have 1 or 2 questions in the last document, E3/1955. This is a list of prisoners who arrived on the 24th of May 1978 The French page is 0087 0415 up to 20. In English, 0018 3685 up to 89. And in Khmer, 00021 270 up to 74. Here we have several lists, and this time there are persons who arrived on the same date, the 24th of May 1978. So the first list consists of 4 persons. That's on the first page, and they were from the S71 office. Then you have the head of K13 and K8, number 2. If we flip over to the next page, we observe that on the same day, the head of K4 office arrived. That person's name is Se Yang. On the next page, we see that on the same day, the head of K17 arrived, as well as the head of K12 and the head of K6. Now, witness, could you first of all tell us whether you authenticated that list, and how come you arrived persons as important as the heads of Office K12, K6, and K17 on the day of the arrival? How come you did register those important persons?
In relation to the registration of names of office chairman, the offices were not big offices. Usually only the sector chairman or the military division commander were considered important people. And usually those people would be received at the outer gate. They would then be brought to me for registration. I would then register their names as well as their brief biographies per usual.
Bien.
Very well. Do you recall whether there was any particular reason why the 6 heads of K offices arrived on the same day, and that, bearing in mind that they were from the Ministry S71? Do you know whether there was a particular purge committed at that time in May 1978?
I did not know about that. It's beyond my authority. My authority was only to deal with what I did on the spot there.
Alors, dans le reste du document,
In the rest of the document, we have a very long list of 29 names, and these are persons from the East Zone still on the 24th of May 1978. I would like to know whether you have any particular remarks to make regarding the arrival of such a large number of prisoners from the East Zone as of May 1978. Was that something normal or customary?
I cannot tell you about that, or whether there were an influx of prisoners for any particular reason. I only yet registered the names of those who were sent to my location.
Je passe à un autre sujet.
I'll go into another line of questioning, that is the conditions under which the prisoners were held in detention. When you cross-checked the lists and ascertained particularly where the prisoners were detained in the cells, were you able to see briefly under what conditions prisoners were held at S21? What is of relevance to me is the conditions under which they were detained. Were they tied up or shackled? And did you observe the manner in which they were sleeping?
Prisoners who were brought to the prison, they were shackled, and they had to sleep while their ankles were being shackled.
Comment était l'odeur qui se dégageait?
What kind of smells were let off the various cells as you passed by?
When I walked past, of course, I felt the stench, since prisoners hate to eat their meals as well as to relieve themselves there.
Vous avez tout de même souvent vu les...
You nevertheless often saw the prisoners while they were detained in their cells or when they had to leave the prison. What were you able to observe regarding their physical condition? For instance, did you notice that they were very skinny? What exactly did you observe?
For prisoners who were detained at S21, I saw some of them, and most of them were emaciated. They were very skinny, since they did not have any proper place to sleep or proper food to eat. And for that reason, they became emaciated, and I refer to all of them.
Vous établissiez des listes de...
You drew up lists of prisoners leaving S21. Did it happen often that on those lists you indicated that those persons died of ill health?
Regarding the daily registration, the report of those prisoners who died in the cells were made by the medic. Usually there was a medic stationed at each building, so when there was a death of an inmate, then that medic would make such a report, and Ho would bring that report to me for my daily registration of the situation.
Parmi ces gens qui mourent,
Among those persons who died in the cells, did you also record persons who died of acts of violence or ill treatment inflicted on them, for instance, during their interrogations?
People who died in their cells, some of them died as a result of severe torture while they were interrogated, and also some of them died because of the lack of food, so they became so weak and that they died.
Sur les rapports que vous transmettez,
On the reports you sent to the medical unit, were any general distinctions made between those who died due to lack of sufficient food, or those who died as a result of torture or ill treatment, as you stated?
The report from the medic was what I copied into the registration, and how would bring the report from the medic to me. For example, if that prisoner died from ill health, then I would write that down in the registration.
pour être complet, vous aviez dit
For purposes of completeness, you stated that on the 28th of July 2009, before this courtroom, the documents E3/7466 at 11:41, you said that it was the medical staff who recorded prisoners who died as a result of torture within the buildings, but they were reported as being ill. They did not. It is not necessarily indicated on the list that they died as a result of torture. Perhaps they simply stated that they died as a result of ill health. End of quote. Do you confirm what you stated at the time before this chamber?
Whatever was written in the report by the medic, I would duplicate it. If the report said the prisoner died from act of torture, although I cannot recall that clearly since it happened a long time ago, if that is what stated in that report to Ho would deliver that report to me, and usually I cannot recall it well whether the report stated a prisoner died from torture or from ill health.
I would like to provide to the witness another document. It's part of the large document E3/3187 at Khmer page 00008891 to 92, and in English 00874564 to 69. Mr. President, may I provide this document to the witness?
Yes, you may.
alors j'ai surligné
Well, I underlined some of the excerpts in green in your version. So this is a prisoner list who died of illness and who were executed between 1 May 1976 and 15 May 1976. First of all, there are 37 names in a table, And then there is another table with 15 names. There is a column where it's written miscellaneous, or others in English, which indicates quite a few things that I'd like to read out to you. In particular, if the person was executed, or if the person died of illness, or of other reasons. So, for example, at number 1, there is a so named Khun, Khou, Cheng, taken from Sector 25, who was a chemical engineer, and who died on 1 May 1976. And in the last column, others, it's written in English.
Bruised-numb.
Dash num, that was.
Alors, je pense qu'en français,
So I believe in French, bruise normally means what it means. Numb. And numb, however, could mean paralyzed in French. So back then, when these terms were used in such a table, such as bruised and numb, what did that mean? What do you understand by that? Did you ever see such lists?
For the list that you mentioned, I did not make the report in such ways. As far as I know, it's probably the list made by Maine. For the mentioning of words like numbs or bruise that resulted in the deaths, it was in the daily reports. And for the words like bruise, it resulted from torture that caused internal pain. And as for numb, it's referred to swelling.
et je note
And I'd like to note to the attention of the parties that there are 13 people who were bruised, quote unquote, and a bit more regarding those who suffered from numbness. Among the 52 people in this list witness, there are 11 of them who were executed, or at least that is what is indicated. That is in the second table, and 40 who died of illness or who died as a result of violence. So was it usual that 40 people would die at S21 because of illness or because of beatings at S21 within a 2-week period?
That was the total list. And as for the period of 15 days, I did not pay much attention to it. Based on my estimate, there were around 1 or 2 people died every day. But as for the total number, as I said earlier, I did not pay attention to it.
lorsque vous étiez
When you were at S21, were you aware of the fact that prisoners, that the blood of prisoners was being drawn.
For prisoners at S21, I did not know clearly about the drawing of blood from the prisoner. I only knew through the reports from the medics.
Oui, pour clarifier.
Well, to clarify things, I'd like to see if you confirm what you already said. It was maybe clearer for you in 2009, on 28 July 2009 at the hearing, at around 11:23, 31 seconds. This is document E3/7466, and you said the following. I acknowledge the fact that indeed they drew blood. Hor asked me to write down the names of the prisoners whose blood had been drawn, so that these names be incorporated into the prisoner lists, into the list of prisoners to be executed. The members of the medical staff, therefore, would receive orders from Hor, and then Hor would give the following order, that is to say, that the names of these prisoners had to be incorporated in that list. End of quote. Free translation. So how is it that regarding these people whose blood was drawn, how was it that they had to be listed in the list of people to be executed? Does this mean that any person whose blood was being drawn had to die? That's my question.
President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. The floor is given to Counsel Victor Kope.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Good morning. Literally 4 out of 5 questions from this prosecutor are leading. I stopped standing because it's pointless, but I would really like this prosecutor to just ask neutral questions, open questions, and not every single question to be leading.
Well, I'll break up this question in two, therefore. So you said in 2009 that Hor asked you to incorporate into the list the names of the people whose blood had to be drawn, and that these people should be put into the list of the prisoners to be executed. So how can you explain that?
When Hor gave me the names on the daily basis, those prisoners whose blood had been drawn were required for their names to be included into the list with those who would be smashed.
When prisoners would leave the compound for their blood to be drawn, I imagine that you would check their identity when they left. And did you ever see any of them come back alive to the S21 compound?
For the prisoners whose blood had been drawn, I did not know the detail because the medical staff proposed to Hor, and Hor decided, and it was the main responsibility of the medical staff. It was not my responsibility.
Oui, bien entendu.
Yes, of course. Well, there are several documents on the case file that describe the drawing of blood, and I will only use one, and this is document E3/2285 on Khmer page 00009212. In English, 00873432. And there is no French version. So, Mr. President, may I provide this document to the witness?
President, your request is granted.
This is a page that lists the names of the prisoners who were smashed on the 21st of May 1977. There are 5 names who came from Divisions 310 and 455 and who arrived between the 14th and the 19th of May 1977. In the last column on the right-hand side, we see the English mention, took blood.
Pris du sang.
So, is this a list that you drew up at S21 upon Hoare's orders?
Hall gave the names of the list of those whose blood had been drawn to me, and I incorporated into the list with those who needed to be smashed.
J'avance.
Let me move ahead because time is running out. Yesterday you said that Duik would make annotations on prisoner lists, and he would write sometimes "com," which means that these people had to be smashed. So on that basis, Hoare would ask you to draw up lists of people who had to be executed. So what I'd like to know is, once these people had been taken out of the prison, how did you know specifically that these people had indeed been executed?
For prisoners who had been removed from the prison, they had a list with the annotation to be smashed. Those prisoners needed to be checked carefully before they boarded the truck and taken away.
Fine, but my question was, once the truck took them away, later on, did you receive any kind of confirmation that these people had indeed been executed? Did the guard unit say something about this or not?
I had no responsibility or no reports back about the prisoner who had been taken away and executed.
Je voudrais être sûr de...
I'd like to be sure about what you're telling us now, because at the hearing of 27 July 2009, at around 1550, this is document E3/7465, and you said the following: when a prisoner was taken away to be executed, once the final list had been checked, this list was sent by Ho, who would send it to the guards, including Hui, Peng, who would keep the list. After the execution of the prisoners, Ho would take the list, and I would check this list by comparing the list of the detainees who were still in the prisoners to the list of the prisoners who had been executed. End of quote. So, did you have to do any checking after the execution of the prisoners?
ក្រោយពីអ្នកទូនដែលបានសម្លាប់ហើយគឺខ្ញុំ
I did not check the list of those who had been killed. It was the unit of 100 men who took the prisoners to the execution site, and they brought the list to Hall, and Hall gave it to me so that I can make the daily reports about those who had been killed.
ហើយចំពោះការដែលគេ
I had no idea whether the people who had been taken out were actually executed, because it was the responsibility of the unit of 100 men, and they were the one who reported to Ho.
Now I will turn to my penultimate topic, and I think I will go beyond my time by 5 minutes. And we're going to now be talking about the Vietnamese prisoners. We spoke about this already a little bit. You told us that when you would receive prisoners at S21 to record them, you were being assisted by a soul named Chum, a prisoner who would interpret for you what the Vietnamese prisoners would tell you. And can you tell us, regarding these Vietnamese prisoners, if these were civilians or if these were soldiers or if you were dealing with both?
For Vietnamese prisoners, there were both civilians and soldiers. For civilians, many of them were arrested at sea, but it's not certain whether they were arrested at sea or at the border areas.
Among the Vietnamese civilians who were brought to S21, were there entire families among them? Entire families that had been arrested at sea or at the border?
For Vietnamese civilians who came in with their families, most of them were arrested at sea.
Now, regarding these people, were they fishermen or were they just people fleeing their country?
President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. The floor is given to Counsel Victor Kope.
Thank you, Mr. President. Besides leading again, there are more than two choices when it comes to Vietnamese people who are not dressed in uniforms. They could be spies dressed or dressed as civilians. So there are all kinds of options. So limiting this witness, those two options, is incorrect. Remember, there was a war going on.
Yes, okay, I will rephrase my question, but I simply wanted to ask the witness that if among the civilians who were arrested at sea, if they were fishermen or if they were people who were fleeing their country.
For those Vietnamese who were arrested at sea, I did not ask them for such things. I simply try to finish the list. So because I did not understand Vietnamese clearly, so I simply put their jobs in various ways, fishermen or whatever. I just wanted to just make the list complete.
Well, to clarify this point, you said before DCCAM, this is document E3/9320 at English page 009091159, Khmer 3 times 0 52000, and French, but it's a poor translation here, 00280498. And I will quote in English because the French translation of the document is a bit problematic.
Were there any Vietnamese nationals? Answer by T. Yes, there were also Vietnamese people who were fleeing to Thailand through Kampong Som. Donc à l'époque, vous aviez dit.
So back then you said to DCCAM that there were people who were fleeing Vietnam and trying to reach Thailand and who had been arrested in Kampong Som. So does this somehow refresh your memory?
I could recall it. Regarding the arrest of those Vietnamese who tried to flee to Thailand, the arrest site was not exactly at Kampong Som. It was somewhere in the sea, and it was many places at sea, and we concluded it was at Kampong Som.
Do you know if the Vietnamese who had been arrested, whether they be civilians or soldiers, and who were brought to S21, do you know if they were interrogated and if their confessions were broadcast on the radio? Did you ever hear about that?
I did not know exactly about the interrogation of the Vietnamese who were arrested, and I did not know either about the broadcast because I did not listen to the radio broadcast.
Now, regarding the photographs that were taken of these Vietnamese prisoners, how were they dressed?
For the photographing of the Vietnamese who were brought in, they were photographed with the types of clothes that the Vietnamese were wearing.
Now I'd like to read out an excerpt of what Pan Tan Chan said during his filmed interview. We spoke about him yesterday, and you recognize him as being the interpreter who assisted you when you questioned a certain number of Vietnamese prisoners for their biographies. This is document E3/2352, and it is at 57 minutes and 19 seconds. Now we have a transcript in all 3 languages, and I will quote what Chan said. At the beginning, the Vietnamese would answer sincerely. They said that they were just simple dwellers close to the border, or that they were fishermen who were fishing along the border. Others stated that they were trying to flee South Vietnam to seek refuge in Thailand. However, Chan, and here he is referring to Mam Nai Elias Chan, did not accept such answers and said, you're going to have to acknowledge that you are part of the army and that you are a secret agent who came to spy in Cambodia. If you do not say that, I'm going to beat you to death. So all of those being interrogated were terrified. They had already been beaten, and they were afraid of dying. So under these conditions, they would say what Chan wanted to hear. And, for example, and they would write their confessions in writing. They would fingerprint them. They would record the sound, and they would take the pictures. They would photograph some of them in the same way they photographed this one, that is to say, dressed in military uniform. Therefore, they could say that they were soldiers, and that was supposed to stand as their evidence. So I'm going to stop here. Did you ever hear what Chan, the interpreter, is describing? That is to say that civilians were dressed up as soldiers so that they may be photographed as such. Vietnamese civilians I'm speaking about.
I did not know well about it because the interrogation of the Vietnamese was carried out at the place of Mom Nai. I did not know what was happening there.
Alors, concernant
Now, regarding the period prior to the arrival of the Vietnamese, that is late December 1978, early January 1979, were there any instructions issued by Doik that all the prisoners at S21 be executed, except those who were working at S21, the prisoners who were working at S21?
I did not know for sure about Dutch instruction in relation to this matter. Usually I would implement instructions that Ho received from Dutch.
vous établissiez les listes.
You drew up lists of outgoing prisoners in late December 1978, early January 1979. Did you observe that all prisoners at S21 were placed on the list of persons to be executed. Were you aware of that or not?
Prisoners who were being detained in late 78 or early 79, I prepared the list of prisoners according to the annotation from Deutsch to her and to me, and I would prepare the list of the incoming or outgoing prisoners based on that report or annotation.
Comment concrètement
In concrete terms, how did the various units at S21 proceed with the task of removing all the prisoners from S21 within such a short time? How did you go about doing such work?
Regarding the writing down the names of prisoners on the outgoing prisoners list, I was pretty busy with that list towards the end of the regime.
Je voudrais montrer
I would like to show the witness list E3/10455. We are still waiting for the translation of this list in the coming days. For the time being, it exists only in Khmer. It's a list of execution of 225 prisoners in December 1978, 31st of December 1978. I would like to show the witness this list to establish the existence of this list and not to show the contents of the list to the witness. I want to establish that this list was drawn up by the witness.
Yes, you may proceed.
Je signale à l'attention des parties que nous
May inform the parties that we requested the translation of this document, and I imagine that it will be placed on Xylab in the near future when the translation will be completed. Can you look at the next page of that document? Witness. The title is The Execution of 225 Prisoners on the 31st of December 1978. We note that there are exactly 225 prisoners on that list. Did you draw up this list at S21?
I was the one who was in charge of drawing a list of prisoners at S21. And before me I have a list of prisoners who were smashed on different days. So I believe this is a consolidated list.
Monsieur le témoin.
Witness, the title on each page at the top of the document is indeed the list of prisoners smashed on the 31st of December 1978. However, there is indeed a column to the right.
Deputy Co-Prosecutor, please hold on, and Counsel Copper, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't have a problem with the first question, asking the witness whether he is the author of the list, but now we're going into the contents of the list. I am unfortunately still not very able to read Khmer. That is a problem. I cannot verify what the prosecution is saying. So unless it is translated in all three court languages, I think that question cannot be asked.
Judge Levine, you have the floor.
Now, for the information of the parties, let me inform you that this list exists in English and the ERN is 012 48 066 up to 083. Furthermore, it should be noted that time has been granted the parties precisely to enable them to acquaint themselves of this list that supports the new list issued by the co-investigating judges.
Voilà, je voulais juste poser une...
I have just one question for you, witness, as regards this list. On the last column on this list, you will see that various dates are indicated. Is this a date? Is this a column that indicates the date of the entry of prisoners into S21 or the date of execution? Bearing in mind that the document is indeed titled List of Persons or Prisoners Smashed on the 31st of December 1978.
The last column may indicate the entry date, as it mentions the 7th or the 10th day of that month, so it is an entry date.
Et dernière question, Monsieur.
And this will be my last question, Mr. President, before the break, and I'll stop after this question. Is this one of the last lists you drew up at S21, consisting of prisoners who are leaving in order to be smashed, or do you recall whether there were other prisoners who were smashed and whose names were on lists that were established after the 31st of December 1978, that is in early January 1979.
From my review, it is a last list of prisoners who had to be smashed. It was on the 31st of December 1978.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je n'ai plus...
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no further questions for the witness.
It is now convenient for us to have a short break. We'll take a break now and resume at 10:30. Court officer, please assist the witness at the waiting room reserved for witnesses and civil parties during the break time, and invite him as well as his duty counsel back into the courtroom at 10:30. The court is now in recess.